Abaddon, the evil angel and the mystery of Satan's imprisonment. If the devil has been imprisoned, why does chaos continue, and do we continue to fall? If evil has been chained in the abyss, but the darkness within us continues to rise? Dear brothers and sisters, I am glad you are here with me today, where we enter one of the most mysterious and controversial parts of the Bible, the imprisonment of Satan and the angel who holds the keys, Abaddon, the angel of the abyss. The book of Revelation tells us that for 1,000 years, Satan has been bound. But here is the haunting paradox: even when the devil is silent, humanity still sins. Even when there is no temptation, rebellion returns. So the question we must ask is not just, has Satan been defeated, but why do people continue to fall, even when he is no longer present? Is Abaddon a mighty angel of heaven or a force of darkness? Is this a prophecy of cosmic justice or a mirror of something deeper within ourselves? Today's journey is not about doubting God. It's about wrestling with ourselves, as Job wrestled, as David cried out, as the apostles questioned. Faith does not fear the unknown. Faith demands. Faith waits. And if this conversation resonates with you, don't stop here. Share, like and join this growing community of seekers who believe that asking is not weakness, it is worship. Why would a loving God let Satan out again after 1,000 years of peace? That's a serious question. Revelation 20 verse 7 says Satan will be released after being locked up for a millennium. But what's truly shocking is what happens next. People don't hesitate. They don't stop to think. They don't look around and say, wait a minute, didn't we just live 1,000 years of peace under Jesus? No, they jump right back into rebellion. Like they've been waiting for this moment. Why? Did God plan this from the beginning? Is it a trap? A test? Or is it the final moment when humanity shows what's really in their hearts? Theologian Gregory Boyd puts it like this: God doesn't want programmed obedience. He wants real love. And real love means real choice. That means love can't be forced. You can't be threatened into faith. It has to be chosen freely, or it's not love at all. And that's what makes this final rebellion so hard to wrap our heads around. These are people who've seen God's justice. They've lived in a peaceful world with Jesus ruling. There's no Satan. No war. No deception. Just truth and peace. And yet, when the option to rebel returns, many take it instantly. That's not about the devil. That's about us. That's about what's been hiding in the heart the whole time. So here's the next question: if Satan's been locked away, who's been whispering to us? Who's been tempting us all along? The answer is painful: maybe it wasn't Satan. Maybe it was us. Jesus said in Mark 7 verse 21, "From within, out of the heart of man, come evil thoughts." In other words, even if you took away every demon, every external influence, we'd still have to deal with our own pride, our own greed, our own jealousy. We don't always need someone to trick us. Sometimes, we choose wrong because we want to. That's what makes the millennium so powerful, and so scary. It's not just a period of peace. It's a mirror. It shows us what's still broken inside, even when everything outside is fixed. N.T. Wright calls it, the revealing silence. When Satan is gone, your choices speak louder than ever. That silence is where real faith shows up. So when people ask, if the devil is gone, why do we still sin? This is the answer. The devil might be gone, but our will is still free. Our hearts still battle between good and evil. The problem isn't always outside. It's often inside. And honestly, that's harder to accept, because we can't cast out what we refuse to confront. The final rebellion proves that. It shows that even paradise isn't enough if your heart isn't changed. Even living with Jesus on earth won't guarantee faithfulness if your love isn't real. That's not a failure of God's plan. That's the depth of human freedom. That's why God allows Satan to return, not because he enjoys chaos, but because he respects your choice. He wants you to pick him when you don't have to. That's what makes love real. That's what makes faith meaningful. So, did God set us up to fail? No. But he did give us a chance to choose. And that chance is everything. If this is starting to make sense, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps us keep making deep, honest videos like this, videos that wrestle with the tough stuff and don't shy away from the big questions. Let's go deeper. Think about this: when Satan is released, he doesn't need to rebuild an army. He doesn't need to explain himself. He just shows up, and the crowds follow. That doesn't happen unless people were already leaning that way. So this isn't about Satan being persuasive. This is about hearts that never fully surrendered. This is about people who played the part, followed the rules, lived in peace, but deep down, never really let go of their rebellion. That's terrifying. Because it means you can live in the best conditions, have access to truth, and still walk away from God if your heart isn't in it. It's a hard truth. But it's also freeing. Because it means your environment doesn't define you, your choices do. So maybe the question isn't, why did God let Satan out? Maybe the better question is, what did that moment reveal about us? It revealed that evil isn't just about Satan. It's about human nature. It's about the condition of the soul. And that's why this matters today. We're not living in the millennium yet, but we're already making choices that show where our hearts stand. You don't need to wait for Satan to show up to know whether you're close to God. You just need to look at your daily decisions. Are you loving others when it's hard? Are you choosing truth over convenience? Are you forgiving when revenge feels easier? Those are the moments that define your faith, not the big dramatic events, but the small choices that build your character over time. That's what the final rebellion teaches us. That's why it's in the Bible. It's not just a future event. It's a warning. It's a call to wake up. To look in the mirror and ask, what would I choose if no one was watching? Because that's who you really are. And that's who God sees every day. If you're still watching, thank you. This is a tough topic, and it takes real courage to explore it. But that's what this channel is about, asking the real questions, digging deep, and staying faithful even when things don't make perfect sense. So again, hit that like button, share this with someone you trust, and subscribe if you haven't already. You help us keep going. Now, back to the big question: can a world without Satan still be broken? Clearly, yes. Because the source of sin isn't just external. It's internal. Revelation 20 isn't about the devil's comeback. It's about the human heart unmasked. It's about what we choose when there's nothing left to blame. And that's why this story is so important. It doesn't just tell us what will happen. It tells us who we are, and who we're becoming. So ask yourself today, if Satan disappeared, would your life look any different? Would your habits change? Would your attitude improve? Or would you still struggle with the same things, because those battles are yours, not his? That's the challenge. That's the invitation. God has always given us the gift of choice. And the final rebellion proves how serious that gift really is. Use it wisely. Choose well. Because the silence of the devil only makes your voice louder. And your voice, your decision, matters more than you think. Revelation 20 verse 3 says that Satan was thrown into the bottomless pit and locked there for a long time. That sounds like a real place, a giant, dark, bottomless pit, a prison for evil to be held forever. But if you think about it, you might start to wonder, is the abyss a real physical space? Or is it just the Bible's way of describing something deeper, an invisible boundary, a spiritual boundary that God has placed to temporarily restrain the influence of evil? According to Bible scholar Michael Heiser, author of The Unseen Realm, the Bible often mixes real and metaphorical imagery when it comes to the supernatural. So the abyss may not be a place you can see or touch, but rather a state of being, a pause in spiritual warfare where God doesn't destroy Satan but strips him of his power. If that is true, then what is being held captive is not only Satan himself, but also the excuses we have been using to avoid facing the truth. Is God saying to us, "I have taken away what you have been blaming. Now look at yourself"? Because clearly, even when Satan is no longer active, we, humans, still make mistakes, still deceive, still be selfish, still make bad choices. So the next question is, if Satan is locked up, who is it that is still whispering in our ears every day? Probably not anyone. Probably it is ourselves. We have long been accustomed to blaming, "The devil tempted me, I was weak and was led astray, something made me do it." But Jesus made it very clear in Mark 7 verse 21, "For from within, out of a person's heart, come evil thoughts." Wrong things do not always come from the outside. They come from what's going on inside us, unchecked desires, unhealed wounds, choices unenlightened by truth. There are times when we make bad choices without anyone's urging, simply because we want to. It's not easy to hear, but it's true. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "The safest road to hell is the one that slopes gently downhill, with no signs, no turns, no no-go signs, a smooth, easy road." In other words, evil doesn't always come banging on the door. Sometimes it's just surrender, compromise, the daily clicking of the tongue. And that's what makes the image of the abyss so haunting, not because it's where the devil is, but because it's a quiet place where we have no one to blame, only ourselves and our choices. In that quiet place, the truth begins to emerge. There are no ghosts to fear. There is no one left to make excuses for. There is only one very direct question left: if there is no evil, why am I still wrong? This question is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is simply a reminder that if you want to change, you need to start from within. You cannot fight the darkness outside until you face the darkness within. You cannot blame Satan forever when you yourself are making bad choices. And perhaps that is why God has allowed a Satan-free time, so that every choice will be based on truth, without any excuses. The millennium is not just a time of peace. It is a test of truth. When there is no one to tempt you, no reason to hide, every action, every thought will reveal who you really are. Then the abyss will not be beneath you, but within you. And you will have to ask yourself, am I ready to face it? Do I dare to look deep into my heart and see what needs to change? Do I have the courage to say, it's not the devil that makes me do this, it's me, and I need God to help me change? It's not easy to do. But it's the beginning of true freedom. Because you can't heal what you deny. And you can't conquer what you don't confront. The enemy within is the undisciplined ego, the old habits that haven't been replaced, the fear that hasn't been named. It doesn't scream. It whispers. And only when you're quiet can you hear it. Maybe the abyss isn't a scary place. It's a place to enter, not to imprison you, but to free you from yourself. No one has to fall into the abyss if they know how to turn around. And no one has to live in darkness if they let the light in. The darkness within isn't a judgment, it's an opportunity. An opportunity to change. An opportunity to grow. An opportunity to truly live the way God intended, not out of fear, not out of compulsion, but because you have seen the truth and you have chosen to follow the light. And just when you think you understand the darkness within. Revelation 9 verse 11 introduces us to Abaddon, the angel of the abyss, a figure so unsettling that he instantly challenges everything we think we know about good and evil, light and darkness, heaven and hell. This is no ordinary being. He commands a terrifying army of locusts described with human faces, lions' teeth, and the sound of rushing war chariots, and yet he is not aligned with Satan, he is called an agent of God. That alone shakes the categories we often feel safe in. How can a force so destructive, so fierce, so associated with judgment, be working on behalf of the divine? But then again, maybe that's the point. Maybe God's justice doesn't always look like kindness and comfort. Maybe sometimes, it comes with a roar. Saint Augustine once said, God even bends destruction to serve redemption, and that's the tension Abaddon forces us to sit with. He isn't a villain, though he looks like one. He isn't the hero we expect, yet he shows up at a key moment in God's story to unleash chaos with a purpose. He disrupts, but that disruption isn't random, it's targeted. His locusts are told not to kill, but to torment, and only those without the seal of God on their foreheads. So this isn't about wiping out humanity. It's about shaking it awake. When we meet Abaddon in Revelation, what we're really being asked is, can holiness sometimes come in frightening forms? Can destruction serve as a kind of divine reset? The answer might be yes, but only if we're willing to accept that God's methods don't always align with our expectations. We like clean categories, good versus evil, light versus dark, angels with soft wings and villains with horns. But Abaddon breaks all of that. He wears heaven's badge and wields destruction's sword. Maybe that's because God's justice is deeper than sentiment. Maybe justice sometimes hurts before it heals. Abaddon reminds us that God isn't a formula, he's a force. And he will use even the things that terrify us to bring about the world he envisions. That leads us to one of the most haunting truths in Revelation: even when evil is locked away, the human heart remains unchanged. Isaiah 11 paints a picture of a perfect world, peaceful animals, safe children, nations no longer at war. But Revelation suggests something much more complex. It shows that even in a world where Satan is bound, people still sin. They still turn against God when given the chance. So what is the millennium really about? Maybe it's not heaven. Maybe it's a spiritual test. A moment in cosmic history where God says, let's remove all external evil. Let's create peace. And then let's see what people choose. That sounds intense, but it makes sense. Philip Yancey put it this way: grace is not a guarantee of obedience. It's a stage for true freedom. In other words, peace doesn't force goodness. It only makes space for it. And what we do in that space reveals who we are. The millennium is not just a gift, it's a spotlight. And under that light, people reveal their true nature. Some draw closer to God, others drift away. Some use peace as a foundation for worship, others see it as a chance to wander. That's not a failure of God's plan, it's the freedom He's always given us. The absence of Satan doesn't guarantee holiness. It just removes one excuse. And in that silence, our decisions become louder. So the millennium exposes the gap between environment and heart. You can live in a perfect world and still be broken inside. You can walk beside truth and still reject it. You can experience grace and still say no. That doesn't mean grace failed. It means grace doesn't override will. It never has, and it never will. God doesn't manipulate us into obedience. He invites us into relationship. And that's what the millennium is about, a wide-open invitation. No fear. No pressure. Just clarity. And in that clarity, some say yes, but many say no. That might sound discouraging, but it's actually a powerful reminder: holiness is always a choice. Even in paradise, the heart must choose. And that choice is what God values more than comfort, more than compliance, more than a peaceful appearance. He wants transformation, not just behavior. So when we look at the millennium and ask, why did people still fall, the answer isn't about Satan. It's about us. The human heart is complex. It carries both longing and resistance, both hunger for God and fear of surrender. And when those pieces aren't resolved, peace becomes a mirror, not a solution. That's what makes the millennium so important in the biblical story. It's not just a break from evil. It's a test of what remains when evil is gone. It's a glimpse into what humans do when all barriers are lifted and all reasons to fear are removed. And what it reveals is sobering: even in the best conditions, we still need saving. Even in a world ruled by Christ, we can still choose pride. Even with Satan bound, the darkness in us can speak loudly. So what does that mean for us now? It means we should stop waiting for the perfect conditions to start choosing God. It means we can't blame our environment, our culture, our past, or even spiritual warfare for every wrong turn. It means that right now, this moment, is just as spiritually real as the millennium will be. You don't need to see locusts in the sky or hear trumpets to know that your heart is being shaped. Every decision you make is carving a path. Every thought you entertain is planting a seed. And over time, those paths and seeds turn into character. So don't wait for a crisis to change. Don't wait for the world to be fixed before you take your soul seriously. Abaddon reminds us that justice can come in surprising forms. The millennium shows us that peace can expose what's broken. And together, they ask one big question: if all the noise stopped, what would your life say about who you are? That's the kind of question that doesn't get answered in one sitting. It takes time. It takes reflection. It takes courage. But it's worth asking, because it helps us understand what God is really after, not just obedience, but transformation. Not just silence, but sincerity. Not just behavior, but love. And in that journey, every moment counts. Every choice matters. Every step brings us closer to the truth about ourselves, and closer to the God who's been inviting us all along. And maybe that's where the book of life comes in. Are we being watched, or are we being waited for? When people think of the book of life, they think of it as a sacred ledger where God records the names of those who are saved. To some, it's a symbol of protection, of eternal hope. To others, it's more like a supernatural tracking system, where even the smallest mistake is recorded. So what's the truth? Ephesians 2 verse 8 says it very clearly, "For by grace you have been saved, not by works." That means the book of life is not a divine scorecard. It's not a list of people who lived perfect lives, but of people who opened their hearts to God. It doesn't record accomplishments, it records relationships. It keeps track of hearts that said, "I trust you," even when life was broken. And that's beautiful, because it shows that God cares more about authenticity than perfection. It doesn't ask you to be good, just to be true. God doesn't want people who have made no mistakes, He wants people who admit they need to be saved. And when Judgment Day comes, many people imagine a tense scene, God sitting on a throne, us standing waiting to hear our fate. But what if all He wants is, to show us the truth? What if it's not a judgment hearing, but a giant mirror that reflects back all the choices we've made? Not to shame us, but to let us see ourselves clearly. Because the truth doesn't break us, it sets us free. Tim Keller once said, "Hell is where the soul goes when it says to God, I don't need you." If so, hell isn't a place of God's punishment, it's where the soul goes when it deliberately separates itself from love. Judgment Day isn't about fear. It's about God saying, "What did you choose? Who did you walk with? Did you make room for me on your journey?" For those whose names are written in the book of life, it is not the end, it is the return. For those who do not recognize His call, it may be the first time they see the emptiness they have been hiding. And even then, God does not hate, He is hurt. Because true love does not force. True love is always a choice. Many people still think that judgment means punishment, but look at the way Jesus lived, we see differently. When the woman caught in adultery was brought before Him, He did not throw stones, He took her by the hand and said, "Go, and sin no more." He did not close His eyes to sin, but neither did He define the person by their mistake. He saw deeper, saw the desire in their heart to live rightly. And He helped them start over. That is what true judgment is, not exclusion, but the opportunity to start again. Not punishment, but light to help us see what needs to change. And in that light, no one is too far to turn back. The book of life, in the end, is not a report card, it is proof that God has never stopped loving you, has never stopped writing your name in His heart. And Judgment Day, after all, will not be when you are asked, "How good have I been?" But when you are asked, "Do you trust me?" And if the answer is yes, then nothing, not even your past, can erase your name from that love. And that brings us back to the oldest question of all. If God already knew we would fall, why give us a choice at all? That question has echoed across centuries, whispered in moments of doubt, shouted in anger, and pondered in silence by thinkers, skeptics, and believers alike. Why place the tree in Eden if he knew Adam and Eve would reach for it? Why allow Satan to roam free, then bind him, and eventually let him go again? These aren't just theological riddles, they're deeply human questions about freedom, love, control, and the meaning of choice. Because real love, the kind that is worth anything, must come with the option to walk away. Without choice, there is no trust, and without trust, there is no relationship. God didn't create us to be puppets. He didn't wire us to follow him like pre-programmed machines. He made us in his image, which means he gave us the ability to decide. That includes the ability to say no, to turn our backs, to rebel. And that is exactly what makes our yes so powerful. Love that is freely chosen carries weight. It carries beauty. It carries the kind of sincerity that nothing forced could ever imitate. That's why the garden had a tree. That's why Satan was allowed a voice. And that's why, even in Revelation, after 1,000 years of peace, rebellion still breaks out. Because even when evil is silenced, the heart still has a choice. C.S. Lewis once said, "God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain." And that pain, that raw exposure of the soul, is where the deepest truths are often found. It's in our freedom that our faith is truly tested. It's in our freedom that our love is proven. We want God to give us peace, but we often resist the process that brings it. We pray for clarity, but we struggle when the answers challenge our assumptions. Freedom is a gift, but it comes with responsibility. And that's the paradox of divine love. It lets you walk away, even as it longs for you to stay. Now imagine this. What if the devil vanished today? What if temptation stopped knocking? What if all the spiritual noise was silenced and it was just you, your thoughts, your habits, your character? Would you still choose goodness? Would you still choose patience when no one tested you? Would you still be faithful when no one praised you? That's the real question behind the end-time prophecies. It's not just about what Satan will do. It's about what you will do without him. Because every day, you and I make decisions that stretch far beyond the moment. Small choices that echo in eternity. Not because a demon tricked us. But because we decided. We chose to love. Or we chose to hate. We chose to forgive. Or we chose to hold a grudge. And those choices build who we become. They aren't controlled by Satan. They're directed by our will. That's why 2 Corinthians 6:2 says, "Now is the day of salvation." Not next week. Not when life feels perfect. Not when you feel more spiritual. Now. Right now. Because if evil has already lost its power, if Jesus already claimed victory, then what's stopping us from living like it's true? Maybe we're still waiting for the devil to disappear before we step into faith. But maybe, just maybe, the only real enemy left to face is the one within. The need to control, the fear of surrender, the pride that whispers, "You're fine on your own." These aren't voices from hell, they're echoes from our own brokenness. And that's where things get painfully real. Because blaming the devil is easy. Owning our choices is not. It's easier to say, "The devil tempted me," than to say, "I chose what I wanted more than what God wanted." But until we say that, healing stays out of reach. Because we can't be freed from a chain we refuse to admit we're holding. So let's flip the question. What if you couldn't blame the devil anymore? What if every excuse vanished and all that remained was your heart, your story, your response? Would that terrify you, or would it finally set you free? Because here's the truth, faith was never meant to be a blame game. It was meant to be a mirror. Not a way to shift responsibility, but a way to see clearly. A way to look inward and ask, who am I becoming? That's the heart of spiritual maturity. Not perfection. Not image. But honesty. God doesn't ask you to be flawless. He asks you to be real. To come to Him with the truth of your struggles, your doubts, your desires, and your dreams. Because only in truth can love grow. Only in truth can transformation begin. And that's the point of the whole story, not to shame you, not to scare you, but to awaken you. To show you that freedom is sacred, and what you do with it matters more than you think. So what would your life look like if you stopped blaming the devil? What would it look like if you embraced the full weight of your freedom, not as a burden, but as a blessing? You might find that you're stronger than you thought. That the Holy Spirit has been equipping you all along. That you're not fighting alone, even when it feels like you are. And maybe that's the secret. God lets us choose, not to test us cruelly, but to dignify us deeply. He believes we are worth loving, even when we struggle. He believes our choices matter, even when they're small. And He believes that redemption isn't just about saving us from evil, it's about waking us up to good. The kind of good that can't be stolen, the kind of faith that isn't shaken by culture or fear or failure. The kind that holds fast even when it costs us something. That's what this life is about. That's what this journey is for. And in that light, maybe rebellion isn't just a risk God takes. Maybe it's a space He makes, for us to grow, to wrestle, to return. Because the return is the most beautiful part. It's what turns a mistake into a testimony, what turns wandering into wisdom. And that's something the devil can never counterfeit. Because he deals in fear. God deals in love. And love always invites. Always waits. Always hopes. So here you are, with a choice not forced on you, but placed in front of you. You can keep searching, keep asking, keep wondering. And God will keep meeting you there. Not with lightning, not with threats, but with truth. And in that truth, you'll see something you might not expect. He's not disappointed. He's not giving up. He's simply inviting you to be honest, to stop hiding, to stop blaming, and to start living like your choices matter, because they do. In the end, this was never just about whether Satan is real or symbolic, whether the 1,000 years are literal or metaphorical. It was about something far more personal. It was about the mystery of our own hearts, and the courage it takes to face them. Abaddon may guard the abyss, but perhaps the true abyss lies within, where choice still reigns, where freedom still speaks. Can we understand what truly drives us? Can we face divine justice not with terror, but with trust? Can we stop blaming the darkness around us and begin transforming the darkness within us? Because faith was never about having all the answers. Faith is about loving the one who is the answer, even when the path feels unclear. If today's video gave you something to think about, to pray over, or to share with someone who's wrestling too, don't forget to like, pass it along, and stay connected. Because sometimes the questions we fear the most are the ones that lead us to freedom.